Welcome to Fearless with Jason Whitlock. I am Jason Whitlock. Happy Monday. Happy Monday, Uncle Jimmy. Great to have you. Fantastic show planned today. Greg Couch is going to join us from Chicago. We're going to talk about Cam Newton and the video Cam Newton put out promoting unity. We'll get Greg Couch's take on that. Delano Squires from Washington, D.C. is going to join us. We'll talk about the shootings outside of Nationals Ballpark on Saturday, which postponed a game between the Nationals and the Padres. We'll talk about the violence going on in Washington, D.C. And Uncle Jimmy has another Bible story you won't want to miss. All that and more on this episode of Fearless with Jason Whitlock. But let's start with a fire Saturday night in our nation's capital. Gunshots outside of Washington Nationals Ballpark sent fans inside the stadium scrambling for safety, suspended a Major League Baseball game, and injured 3 people. Mainstream corporate media blame gun violence. The more likely culprit is gang violence. Police say the shots came from shooters in separate cars firing at each other. Maybe guns were behind the steering wheels and pulling the triggers. It's more likely gang members drove the cars and aimed the weapons. As a country, we loathe to talk about gang violence unless we're glorifying it in music. We prefer to discuss the danger of guns and the evil of the National Rifle Association. I used to do it too. The last time gun violence impacted a sporting event, I argued in a column that the Second Amendment had outlived its usefulness. That was in 2012. A linebacker for the Kansas City Chiefs, Javon Belcher, shot and killed his girlfriend and then drove to the team's practice facility and shot and killed himself in front of the team's head coach and general manager. I wrote a piece for Fox Sports stating that what I believed at the time, the proliferation of handguns makes America unsafe. The great broadcaster Bob Costas read an excerpt of my column on NBC's Sunday Night Football in America. Listen to this.
You want some actual perspective on this? Well, a bit of it comes from the Kansas City-based writer Jason Whitlock, with whom I do not always agree, but who today said it so well that we may as well just quote or paraphrase from the end of his article. Our current gun culture, Whitlock wrote, ensures that more and more domestic disputes will end in the ultimate tragedy, and that more convenience store confrontations over loud music coming from a car will leave more teenage boys bloodied and dead. Handguns do not enhance our safety. They exacerbate our flaws, tempt us to escalate arguments, and bait us into embracing confrontation rather than avoiding it. In the coming days, Javon Belcher's actions and their possible connection to football will be analyzed. Who knows? But here, wrote Jason Whitlock, is what I believe. If Javon Belcher didn't possess a gun, he and Cassandra Perkins would both be alive today.
Now, I've never liked guns. I still don't. But the last decade has helped me understand their value in a free society. A decade ago, I took American freedom for granted. I thought the people who argued that the political left would strip Americans of basic freedoms, I thought they were crazy. Now I don't think they're crazy. The government and big tech are steadfastly censoring speech they don't like. They're dictating medical choices for all of us. They've recklessly opened our borders and relaxed immigration restrictions. They've undermined respect for and support of law enforcement to the point that many major cities feel absolutely lawless. I live in a very nice, pricey area of Midtown Nashville. There have been several shootings, including a murder within a block of my building. I'm gonna get a gun in 2021. It's inevitable. The gatekeepers of American culture, the super elites who live in gated communities and employ private security teams, have purposely created a culture that bows to violent gang culture. Look at the reaction to what happened at Washington Nationals Ballpark. A fan who left the game to catch an Uber was one of the victims. Gang violence directly impacted the sports world. Are the multimillionaire social activist athletes loudly decrying what happened? Have we heard from Colin Kaepernick or LeBron James? Has Jamel Hill tweeted a word? They're all sitting by police scanners waiting for a white cop to shoot another unarmed black resisting criminal suspect. That happens about once a month. Gang shootings happen hourly across America. But you can't gain Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook followers taking on the Crips, Bloods, Gangster Disciples, and MS-13. What you can do is idolize and celebrate the rappers who normalize and celebrate gang culture and gang violence. I've long had a love-hate relationship with gangster rap music. I consider commercial rap fast food, something that I clearly enjoy, but I also know is bad for my health. Dr. Dre, he's McDonald's. Tupac Shakur, Popeye's Chicken. Tech Nine, he's Wendy's, my favorite. You can't eat fast food forever, though. It's going to kill you. The glorification of gang culture is killing America. You might think it's only killing Black America. That's not true. You have to think of the left-wing gatekeepers, the Hollywood and music executives who finance the promotion of gang culture. You got to think of them the same way as you think of the scientists at the Wuhan lab in China. Gangster rap is a gang of function mutation that escaped the lab and is killing us all. American culture is in crisis. We've legalized a lethal dose of immorality, dishonesty, and idolatry. Our code of conduct is driven by popularity, profit, and fear. It's safer to demonize guns than gangs. Guns don't pull triggers. Gangs do. All right, Uncle Jimmy.
That's a fire.
That is a fire.
That's a fire.
I have said a mouthful. You have a take.
You said that, and you said that it's not just a Black American problem.
Yes.
Yeah. This right here brings it to the forefront of saying this is not just a problem of Black America, because they're not building any ballpark stadiums in the ghetto. These things, these actions, these things that this is when you see people on the news say, well, we never thought this would happen in our neighborhood. I know. Now it's spilling out into your neighborhood. And this is where we're at right now. And trust me, it's going to be something that's going to have to be dealt with in our society.
But it's not just the violence that's spilling out. It's the moral decay. And does the moral decay show up most where there are no fathers and there's dysfunction in the home and there's no nuclear family of support? Yes, the moral decay shows up most there. But even in the two-parent homes, even in the suburban homes where the kids are listening to this type of music, that explains why our kids, regardless of parental home background, they're different than previous generations. They're not, again, this moral decay, and I keep going back to the same thing over and over again, but it's the only explanation, is why America is disconnected from its Judeo-Christian values. We've allowed a lethal level of moral decay, and we've turned everything in it. We legalize any and all behavior, and we make excuses for any and all behavior. Oh my God, well, of course they're shooting each other. They're poor. Of course, their parents are divorced and they're having kids out of wedlock. There was redlining, and they didn't get to buy homes in white neighborhoods. I mean,
I heard about that.
Seriously, this kind of bullshit that's being said constantly. Oh my God, redlining, and that just cut it out, man. Just cut, because my father intentionally redlined himself into the Black community and into the inner city. He wasn't out randomly shooting people and killing people.
No. You asked the question. Well, you said that families. You said the mother. You said the father. You know, but a lot of times we say the father's missing in the home, and that's the problem. Hey, man, you know what's missing in these homes? Christ. If you had Christ in your life, you wouldn't even be listening to that stupid music. If your mind was right, you wouldn't. That stuff wouldn't even fester with you.
That, I'll say this, as I've gotten deeper in my walk, it's incredibly hard to listen to the music. Back in the day,
it was a little easier.
It was a lot easier, to be honest with you, Jim. I mean,
okay, bro, who amongst us has not rolled down the street, smoking a little endo?
Not me.
Sipping on some gin and juice. Come on, man.
We've certainly listened to that song.
And we listened to it.
And play, but it is a lot harder. Particularly, we've just gone too far. And everything is now just porn. Because no one would have to be, we don't even have to be creative on this show. If we just sunk to the lowest common denominator and what is most popular, we could just throw porn on the air every day, cuss and scream, show sex. That's what drives the internet. Nothing's more downloaded than porn. And so we've put that into the world, into society, music, in terms of, I've listened to rap songs where the only word they ever rap is the N-word. That's the rhyme.
Or B.
Yeah. That's the rhyme to, it's some kind of profanity. And I'm like, everybody's doing it. Everybody's got the same. And so this is orchestrated and intentional, and we have a country in crisis because of it. The entire country. The same kind of corruption that spills out violently in the inner cities. There's a different kind of financial violence that we've legalized all over Wall Street. The Capitol, this sacred Capitol where there was the insurrection. Them politicians are all corrupt. Nancy Pelosi's worth like $100 million. She made that through insider corruption, in my view, and just being at the center of power, and her and her husband being able to invest in whatever they want with insider information. We've built a corrupt society. We're going to get deeper into this. We're going to go to a man that lives in Washington, D.C. Delano Squires is going to join us in the next segment. But before we go, did you know that 80% of grass-fed beef sold in the United States is imported from overseas? It's truly staggering. That's why I get my meat from GoodRanchers.com. Their product, 100% American. What's better than that? What's better than 100% American? What's better than supporting American farmers? When you buy your steak and chicken from Good Ranchers, not only are you getting ethically raised, sustainably sourced meat, you are also supporting American farmers. All of their product is individually wrapped, vacuum sealed, and ready to grill. This helps to eliminate waste. Good Ranchers safely delivers American craft beef and better than organic chicken right to your door. I've had it right to my door, to my kitchen.
Love
it's
it. We
awesome.
need some more.
Actually,
we need some more.
Can we ask for more right now on air? Please send us more. Thank you.
It's gone.
Check out the Family Feast Bundle, which includes steak and chicken. If you subscribe, you'll get $20 off and free express shipping. Get steakhouse quality for less than $5 per meal. Go to goodranchers.com/fearless to get $20 off and free express shipping. That's goodranchers.com/fearless. Welcome back to Fearless with Jason Whitlock. All right, let's roll out to Washington, D.C. and be joined by our favorite friend of the show, Fearless contributor Delano Squires. He's written a terrific column today that you can find at theblaze.com about America needing people reform more than police reform. We'll get to that in a second. First, I want to engage with Delano about my column, or my monologue that you guys just heard me talking about what went on at Washington's National Park, and just I think I have flipped on the Second Amendment. I'm a long time person that thought the Second Amendment had outlived its usefulness, but I now have to admit I was dead wrong about that. That, I thought that conservatives that said, oh man, you're not careful, these left-wing people will take away all your freedoms, but I thought that was crazy. Living here in the last 2 years, I don't think they're crazy anymore. Delano, what's your take, what's your position on the Second Amendment?
Hey, Jason. I think like a lot of people, and it sounds like you, my views on the Second Amendment have evolved over time. I grew up in Queens, New York, and when I was a kid, gun equaled homicide. It was that simple. The notion of people being armed, particularly out in public, was one that I just associated with particular types of violent acts, and it was almost never for self-defense. But as I got older and I read more and understood, began to understand the context of the Second Amendment, people always frame it as an issue of hunting or self-defense, but really it's about protection against government tyranny, which some people may think is an outdated notion, but I still think is one that applies today. But as I learned more and I grew and I sort of grew in my understanding, my views started to change. And honestly, as it relates to self-defense and being a father, I see it as my responsibility. So I actually purchased a firearm last year in 2020. Went through the process here in DC, the entire process, all of the registration and the fees. And one of the most interesting things about that entire process is that when I got to the point of taking my firearm home, the people who were processing the paperwork were asking me questions about whether I was going to go through and get a license to carry concealed, which is legal in DC, but you just have to go through even more steps. And they asked the questions in a way that I took it as, in some respect, they were encouraging me to go forward and do that. And I just found that to be very interesting. It's not what I was going into the process expecting. But I think ultimately, the issue of the Second Amendment and firearms and gun rights is one that really brings into focus why our country has the system of government that it does, where certain powers and rights are given to the federal government and others are kept for the states and the people. And I don't expect a person in Brooklyn, New York to have the same view of guns as someone in Dallas, Texas. And I don't think they have to have the same viewpoint. I think all of us should be concerned about, the increase in violent crime in cities and counties across the country. But I don't think that a repeal of the Second Amendment, which is ultimately what many activists want, they just don't have the courage to say that. I don't think a repeal of the Second Amendment would solve that particular issue.
What I've come to understand, Delano, and I want your reaction to this, is that the Second Amendment is a symbol for a lot of Americans about whose country is it. Is it my country or is it the government's country? And it wasn't until the last year or two that I really kind of bought into that. No. The right for me to own a gun and to protect myself is it's like another constitution or another Declaration of Independence. And what separates us from other countries, in my view, it's like, no, this is our country. As individuals, we get to protect ourselves. And now I've bought into the mentality, if they take this away, if they take this right away from me, we're no longer America. We're just like everybody else. And I don't want to be just like everybody else.
Yeah, and the craziest part of it is that the same people who push for gun control, and ultimately gun control is people control, because what's clear is that criminals are going to have guns. They have them and they will continue to get them, whether or not stricter gun laws are enacted. Gun control laws are really to keep guns out of the hands of law-abiding citizens. That's crystal clear to me. because criminals, by virtue of being criminal, they're going to do whatever they have to do to subvert whatever law is already out there, right? Murder is against the law, but we see, obviously, as I said, an uptick in homicides across the country. But you're right, and as I was gonna say, the people who push for gun control are also the ones who push for defunding the police. So on one hand, they say we should have fewer police officers in the community because they don't really keep the community safe. And on the second hand, they say you should have fewer options and opportunities to defend yourself because guns don't really keep anybody safe. Which leads me to ask, well, then who am I supposed to look to keep me safe? Is it the BLM activists who live out in their all-white communities while they preach a message of racial justice? Is it the rich celebrities who have private security? Is it the politicians who have 24-hour details? Whose responsibility is that going to be? And no one seems to answer that question. So, yeah, I think that last year really brought into focus the very question that you put out there, like, whose country is it? And one thing that I noticed, particularly after January 6th, and I was clear, I didn't make many public statements like on social media about the rioting and the looting during the summertime. But after January 6th, for me, the only thing I said on social media was, I think all types of political violence are wrong. And I don't change my opinion based on the politics of the people doing it. So political violence can't be the language of the unheard for one group and then, a capital crime for another group. But what you saw really play out is that the same people who were saying that our democracy is under attack, our country is under attack after January 6th, were the ones making excuses for looters and rioters. I'm not talking about protesters. I mean actual looters and rioters, people burning other people's businesses to the ground all summer. And it really made me ask the same question, well, whose interests do they serve? Whose country is this? And why is it that when, the mom and pop shop owner in a particular community is getting their business burned down, the response from the elites is, well, they should have had insurance. And the response from the activists is, well, this is reparations. But when those same elites have their own workplaces threatened, then what they wanted was an all-out manhunt for every person who was even in attendance at the protest march on January 6th. So to me, that makes it clear that for them, for the elites in media and academia, the elected officials, they are looking out for their own interests, not the interests of the people.
In terms of looking out for their own interests, one of the clever things they do in corporate media is they talk about gun violence. And I, having spent formative years in the inner city, my dad having never left the inner city, his bar business being my favorite place on earth in the inner city, we weren't really concerned about gun violence. We were concerned about gang violence. And no one, it's like the media very cleverly, let's talk about gun violence, but there seems to be risks to talking about gang violence, and they avoid it. Why is that?
I think it's a lot easier for them to focus on guns because by doing so, they can do a couple things simultaneously. One, they can criticize the gun manufacturers. So a lot of these folks are anti-capitalism and anti-big business. So they can criticize gun manufacturers. They can criticize the NRA, which they see as a vestige of white supremacy, right? Because they think that the NRA is why half of this country's homicides are, the victims are African Americans. They think that the NRA is behind that. The third piece is that as long as they're talking about guns, they can say this is a systemic problem. And if it's a systemic problem, then you need to elect people who can provide a systemic solution. And what do you know? We are those people. So if you elect us, we can enact gun control, which again is just people control, and really is only going to affect the law-abiding. We can get into office and we'll fix this problem for you. Now, if you had to take on gangs, and particularly gangs in the inner city, that would mean addressing a number of other issues. Some of those issues are going to deal with families and the breakdown of family. Some of those issues are going to be around values and the respect for life. And the Democratic Party is very reluctant to offer any public criticism on any topic that would be seen as directed at what they deem as marginalized and oppressed communities. So they don't want to say anything to upset their African American and Hispanic base. So they would much rather talk about guns, as you said, or police, or the Boogaloo Boys, or white supremacists, or neo-Nazis. They would rather frame the issue of black folks being victims of crime as one of white supremacy issue than they would rather do that than address some of the other issues that are brought up. And that's pretty clear. That's why everyone, when people say their names, we're always talking about people who've often had fatal encounters with the police. I challenge anyone out there listening to this to name the last person particularly African American, who was killed not by the police or a white vigilante, but by someone in their own community whose name you know. Take out famous people, so take out Nipsey Hussle, take out artists or entertainers, but just the last regular person, last kid, last teenager, last grandmother, who you can think of whose murder brought national attention to the issue of violence in the inner city.
Delano, you being a father, I want to ask this question as a follow-up, because the Democratic Party and leftists do seem very afraid to say anything that might be a solution for black people or might upset black people. And so you being a father, this is what I always say to people, is like, that's not love. That's not, because as a parent, you're constantly correcting your children, occasionally scolding them. You might even spank them, but it's all out of you. It's a necessary love, and you're trying to point them towards solutions. Don't do this, do that. And so I see the left approach to black people is neglect. And so if you're trying to be their leader, and again, I don't, the paternal thing maybe isn't the perfect analogy, but if you're trying to be their leader, you need to be offering people solutions, and you need to be telling people, hey man, you're doing this wrong. If you do it this way, the results will be better. I see the approach of the left and the Democratic Party, it's just blatant neglect and allowing people to, anything you do, it's great. And anybody that corrects you, they're racist. And so I see myself I'm not a political conservative, but I'm conservative by the definitions thrown around today. But I see people on the right or whatever that want to say, no, hey, black people, this illegitimacy rate and whatever, that leads to terrible results. And the immediate, he's conservative, that's racism.
Right.
We're being neglected and denied solutions, all under the guise of protecting our very fragile feelings and protecting us from racism. It's death, man. They're just feeding us death and neglect.
I actually think that the paternal analogy is spot on, at least from their perspective. Many of them do think that they are our parents. They see black people as children who need to be managed, as opposed to free men and women who need to be reasoned with and whose interests need to be actually engaged. But as you said, it's like if you want to claim that you care about a particular group of people and you want to get their vote and you want to lead them in some respect, you need to be honest with them. And I think part of the problem is that our country has a very, very difficult time talking about culture apart from race. So whenever we hear culture, people immediately think race. But to me, culture, speaks to the norms, the values, the behaviors, the beliefs that are accepted in a particular environment, right? And those things can be prevalent, but they're never inherent. Culture is not something that you're born with per se. It can be socialized, it can be incentivized, or it can be disincentivized. So things that used to be part of American culture, the first thing that comes to mind is like smoking. Smoking used to be in all the movies and the TV shows, and we got to a point where we realized it causes cancer and emphysema, is bad for people's health. So we use policy, law, lawsuits, pop culture to go after it. And now it's not that people don't smoke, but it's not something that is promoted and is not nearly as prevalent in American society as it used to be. So I think one of the things we need to do is learn to discuss culture. And every institution, every organization has a culture. Families have a culture. Communities have a culture. Countries have a culture. And regardless of race, if you're in neighborhoods where settling disputes is done with a gun on the street in broad daylight, that's never going to give you good results. This is not, the mafia circa, 1934, where there are bloody gang wars, but it's only the guys who are involved in that activity who end up being the victims, right? Obviously, their families mourn, but that's a lot different than kids, toddlers, and 5-year-olds and 7-year-olds who are having to duck and take cover on city streets because two guys, who don't like each other see one another and then start shooting out. So I do think, in many respects, Democrats do not treat their black constituents as fully human, or as people with agency, because when they're talking about white people, and particularly white men, they have no problem talking about what people believe, their actions, the demons that lie within, that they're motivated by white rage or white supremacy or white privilege. They have no problem individualizing and sometimes painting broad strokes, based on a particular demographic group. They have no problem doing that. But when it comes to black folk who commit crimes, right, then the conversation shifts immediately to resources, to systems, to structures. Now, the only structure they don't want to talk about is family structure, and the only system that they neglect to mention is the value system. But when it's in our communities, their solutions are always about more resources. So white people have agency, they have self-determination for good and evil, but black people are just pawns on a chessboard, right? Who just move about only motivated by historical trauma and current oppression. So if you put the right programs in place, you'll get them to stop doing X, Y, and Z. And I reject that. That's not something that's fit for free men. Part of being a human is the capacity for both great good and terrible evil. And unless you treat people as human beings and as individuals, not painting broad strokes based on skin color, but addressing their actual behavior, we're not going to get out of this thing.
Let me tell you what else has a culture: music. And I talked about in my monologue about I've had a long love-hate relationship with rap music, commercial rap music in particular, gangster rap music in most particular. And I've said it's like fast food. You love it, but any smart person realizes, like, man, that's really toxic and damaging. You need to be eating some raw vegetables and home-cooked meals and baked stuff, blah, blah, blah. That's what commercial rap music is, although the older I've gotten and as my spiritual journey has grown, it's really hard for me to listen to commercial rap music. It's a toxic culture. What's your position on commercial rap, gangster rap in particular?
I think when I was younger, a younger man, I had a similar love-hate relationship, particularly with gangster rap and some of the excesses of hip hop culture. At this point, it's pretty much all hate. I think gangster rap is one of the most destructive cultural forces and cultural inventions of the last 50 years. Anything that teaches a group of people, that promotes to them, that promotes, glorifies, commodifies murder amongst its males, degradation from its men to its women, and drug use and abuse among its youth is not something that I think people should sign on to. And hip hop is not just, and gangster rap is not just some fringe element out there that's enjoyed by the crazies. It is, in many respects, it's mainstream culture. And it's not just mainstream American culture, it's something that's been packaged and sent all across the globe. And in many respects, it is the thing that goes in front of black folk across the world. So if you are a student and you're studying in, Japan or some other place, some other foreign country, you shouldn't be surprised if people make judgments about you based on the things that they've seen on BET. So I think it's a destructive force. If I had my way, guys like Future would be working at Target and Cardi B would be working at a juice stand. I think anyone who promotes that type of filth should not be given a perch of privilege, should not be endorsed by politicians, should not be name-checked and quoted by religious leaders, and should not be the face of a particular community. I get why in the black community, artists and entertainers have a particular type of influence, right? But we're way past the days of Harry Belafonte and Jim Brown. These are people who peddle garbage to our communities. They encourage our sons to gangbang while they send their sons to private schools. They encourage our daughters to get butt injections and take out pages on OnlyFans, while they would never, expose their own children to that type of trash. So I don't have much regard for those types of artists, but I'm not in favor of banning the music. Let me just be clear. As I said, I believe that black people, like everyone else in this country, are individuals who have agency, who have decision-making power. I think that what people try to sell you is a reflection on them and what they think you'll buy. What you buy from them is a reflection of you and what your own values are. And what the people who claim to represent you encourage you to buy is a reflection on them and what their interests are. So to me, my answer is not to ban hip hop per se, it's to drain it of its power and to shrink the demand so that artists are forced to go and do something different. That's how I would address it. And I think having more people who say those things publicly instead of what we have now, which are, and I'll quote from one of my earlier pieces, cultural geldings, right? Jason, you're a sports guy, so you know a gelding is a male horse that's been castrated. And they castrate horses so that they would be more docile and well behaved. And that's what many of the men in our community are like, particularly the public figures in our community are like. They will never say anything publicly that's critical of whether it's Lil Nas X or Cardi B. They may say it privately. There's no way that the Obamas want Sasha Malia to emulate Cardi B. They'll never say that publicly. But I think we need more people who are willing to speak up and call a thing. Because I was watching, a couple months ago, ABC aired the show Soul of a Nation. They talked about, about the state of Black America in 2021. They went back 100 years to talk about Birth of a Nation, and they said it was, a racist film that depicted, black folk as violent and lustful.
Still has impact today. Yeah.
Right. Now, they'll say that movie from over 100 years ago still has impact today, but they won't address the impact of hip-hop culture, and particularly gangster rap, over the last 30 years. So these are not people to be taken seriously.
You said so much there, and I don't even know if I should get lost in this side point I want to make, but I'm just going to make it because it was interesting and crossed my mind. He talked about geldings and that black men basically have been castrated. And I thought about when you said that, there was a popular TV show on HBO called Game of Thrones. If you haven't watched it, I'm sure you heard of it. Mm-hmm. And the only black characters on there, basically black men, were geldings. They were eunuchs. They were men without members. And Game of Thrones was, to me, a television show that if you got beyond the sorcery and all the little magical stuff, it was basically about what people will do for power. And they'll do anything for power. And it was basically kind of an explanation of where we are in America and in the culture globally, that we're at a time where people, one guy burned his daughter at a stake. Stannis, I think Baratheon, I think burned his daughter at a stake in order to get power. And so it was just like, we will do anything for power. But I was just, in the Game of Thrones, I was like, and look how they got black men characterized. None of us were fighting for the throne. We had no power. And we had no I mean, just quite honest.
I think the word that the Blaze would prefer is wang dangs. Come on.
But it was just like, this is unreal. And then the other point that crossed my mind while you were talking, and I've made this point before, but take gangster rap music and rappers and Cardi B and Jay-Z and everybody. They're pornographers, basically. They're lyrical pornographers. They're Hugh Hefner, basically. Hugh Hefner put out pornographic pictures for a magazine, attained a lot of wealth, power, whatever. But white culture never treated Hugh Hefner like he was a leader or a spokesman for anybody white. That was Hugh Hefner. He's got a little Playboy mansion. People get freaky over there. You can go have a good time with Hugh Hefner. But with our pornographers, Cardi B's interviewing the president. Jay-Z is seen and Beyonce are seen as the spokesman for Black America. They've turned our pornographers into our leaders, and they've castrated black men. And the left is doing this. But we keep calling religious conservatives the racists. But I'm looking at Hollywood and the music industry and the lane they've put us in, and because I don't deny the existence of racism. We're pointing the finger at the wrong people.
Right.
And I don't understand why we're doing this. It's so in our face. I don't understand why people can't recognize, or is it just I'm gonna go along to get along? The media's telling me it's these people. I can't think for myself. Rachel Maddow's my leader. Don Lemonade's my leader. Anderson Cooper's my leader. I don't get why we can't see what's obvious. We've been placed in a lane and castrated, dehumanized, and made pornographers. And you got something you want to say, or can I move to my next little topic here?
Just real quick. There was a really good documentary that came out, I want to say about 10 to 12 years ago, called Beyond Beats and Rhymes. It's by a gentleman named Byron Hurt. And he talked to hip hop artists. This was early 2000s. So, you had Busta Rhymes. I want to say may have had 50 Cent. So you had a bunch of guys who were popular at that time. And he talked about the impact of hip hop. He talked to Russell Simmons, who, again, in terms of being of lacking a certain type of masculine virility, when asked about hip hop and his influence, he immediately started making excuses. Oh, hip hop is just a reflection of the issues in culture and society. So you can't expect us to do anything different until you fix those issues. And to me, as I said, I have such little respect for people like that, because they claim to be kings, and some of them gods, by the way, right? Little G. They claim to be these strong, powerful presences. But anytime you ask them to do something about something that's in their community that they themselves are doing, they'll tell you, I'm powerless until somebody else changes. So it was a really good documentary. one gentleman in the movie, and I'm paraphrasing, he said something to the effect of that the Klan's PR department could never have come up with images as degrading as the ones that you see in hip hop. And the one image that always sticks out to me is from Nelly in his video Tip Drill, where he swiped a credit card down the backside of a black woman. Now, anyone who tells me that Nelly was serving as a field reporter, right, for CNN, that hip hop is the CNN of the streets, is selling you a bunch of nonsense. This is about them promoting a particular lifestyle, and that's the thing I think is important to get through. Rappers don't just promote products, liquor and jewelry and clothing. They promote values. And the same people who tell you that representation matters and kids want to be what they see when it comes to black doctors and engineers and lawyers, we should not allow them to run away from holding that same principle when it comes to, gangster rap or some of the other filth that's out there. If representation matters, it has to matter all the way across. And unless we want to spend, we spent the 90s trying to keep our sons out of gangs, and we're going to spend the 2020s trying to keep our daughters off of OnlyFans. And unless that's the reality that we want, it's high time that somebody started speaking up about that.
Delano, I want to move to the piece you wrote today for The Blaze. It's terrific. It has some synergy with what I wrote and what I talked about in my monologue. You wrote a piece about people need to be reformed before we can reform the police. Explain on your column today.
Sure. I mean, the premise of the piece is very simple. Like the crime that we see going on, the uptick in crime, and particularly homicides, the most violent crimes, are things that reforming the police are not going to change. I mentioned the shooting outside the Nats Stadium over the weekend, but I also mentioned the shooting of a 6-year-old girl less than 5 miles away in D.C. And she was shot, caught in the crossfire, as is always the case in a lot of these big cities, where innocent bystanders are the ones that end up getting hurt. And it will generate local coverage, because it always does. And I would never say that the local communities and local leaders on the ground are not concerned, because they are. The problem is that the coverage of these types of incidents rarely goes anywhere but local. So you never have activist athletes standing up and saying we need to have justice for this person or the next. And it's our conversations around the threats to black life in this country are so skewed, and a big part of that is the influence of corporate media, because they only are interested in stories that keep black people in a particular position, and that is as victims primarily of police violence and white vigilante violence, not victims of violent crime. And there's no greater disparity. This is for all the people who talk all the time about systemic racism. There's no greater disparity in some of our big cities than the victims of violent crime, particularly of homicide. In New York City last year, 94% of the homicide victims were either black or Hispanic, and 98% of the shooting victims were either black and Hispanic. So, as I said, there's no greater disparity, whether it's New York or Baltimore, St. Louis, in many of these cities, than who becomes the victim of violent crime. So I think that unless our conversations around police reform also include conversations about what we the people, and this is not a race issue, because last year's unrest in the country showed that chaos and disorder and lawlessness attract equal opportunity offenders. So you had, and I said this in the piece, you had rich white kids in New York who spend their weekends, in Connecticut and on yachts, who were taking part in, violent activity, violent protests. You had the children of immigrants. I mentioned one young woman who was a Pakistani immigrant and the other Jamaican immigrant who tossed a Molotov cocktail into an NYPD vehicle, an unoccupied NYPD vehicle, to my knowledge. You had the white mainly largely white Antifa protesters in the Pacific Northwest. You had a rainbow coalition of anarchists in Chaz in Seattle. You had BLM looters in Chicago with local activists calling it a form of reparations. And then it culminated on January 6th, where you had largely white conservative males who again showed that no one group has a monopoly on lawlessness, chaos, and disorder. And I think what all of those things point to is that there's something missing for a lot of us. And I think when Joe Biden said that his presidential campaign was a battle for the soul of the nation, I think he had it completely wrong. I think part of the reason that the soul of the nation is in such disarray and where the country is in such disorder is because in many respects we've made politics a god. We've made politics an idol, and it's replaced religion for a lot of people. And for one camp, their approach to politics is a more if I'm to sort of walk the analogy out, is more Catholic in nature, right? Some of them see Donald Trump as their pope, as their exalted leader, and he's infallible when he's speaking from his office. And then the other side, I'd call them, they're Protestants, right? They protest everything. There's always a problem that the world is never perfect, so they protest racial injustice and environmental injustice and gender justice and reproductive justice. Now, most of these are just euphemisms. Reproductive justice is just code word for abortion. So for them, for that side, criminal justice means letting criminals who've been convicted and are sitting on death row, letting those people go. And reproductive justice means killing innocent babies in the womb. So both sides have made politics an idol. And I think we're not going to get out of this just by reforming the police. So I think it's time that we address some of the things that are going on in our country. And a lot of them, as always, just they lead right back to the family. And until our leaders are willing to have those difficult conversations, we're going to stay where we are.
That is where I was going to go next. I was going to mention the passage you wrote about Joe Biden, said his presidential campaign was a battle for the soul of the nation. Nothing could be further from the truth. The moral decay that manifests itself in senseless, violent crime cannot be fixed by politicians and bureaucrats. And that was going to lead me to my next question. If not politicians and bureaucrats, which you're 100% right, who does fix it?
Sure. So I'll start here, right? I don't tend to use terms like solve or fix when it comes to matters of public policy, because those suggest that you'll get to a state where certain problems will be non-existent. As I've said before, I'm a Christian, so I believe what the Bible says about humanity, and this world is fallen. So there's always going to be sin. There's always going to be a crime. Those things are always going to be here. The first murder was brother against brother, right? Cain and Abel. So it's not that we'll ever get to a place where these things will be non-existent. But I think if we want to see positive change, if we want to, for lack of a better term, bend the arc of our civilization back to order, it's going to be on the people. People love to talk about, individual rights, and that's great. But on the flip side of that coin, with one side being rights, is the other side being responsibilities. So I'm all for talking about inalienable rights. And this goes back to our conversation about, the Second Amendment. But as I said in the piece, there are also some unavoidable responsibilities. And until we start having honest conversations that, particularly about the state of the American family and its decline over the last 50 years, part of that has been driven by politics, because one side has been of the belief that Uncle Sam is a suitable father and husband, and I would reject that notion, completely. But if we continue to see the dissolution of families, and particularly the nuclear family, let me be specific with my words. If marriage and child rearing continue to be decoupled, I think we're going to continue to see some of those issues, because it's one thing if Hollywood starlets do it, right? They'll say, hey, I have enough money, I can pay for whatever services I need for my kid. But when you have communities where their entire neighborhoods where there's not a male over the age of 35, you're going to be in trouble because young men need guidance and they need to be socialized properly. And their fathers are the best people to do that. And again, this cuts across race because when the kids had one of the first mass shootings in our collective memory was at Columbine. One of the first questions that people asked when we learned that the kids were planning these things in their basement or in their garage is, where are the parents? And that's the question I ask all the time. When teenage girls are carjacking people and sticking people up, and teenage boys are shooting on the street and causing chaos in their communities, regardless of what color they are, my first question is always, where are their parents? And it's not to say their parents are not trying, and many parents do all that they can. But some of these issues tie directly back to the family. It's not about more recreation centers. The little girl who was shot in DC on Friday was shot at 11 p.m. Now, unless the answer is to keep recreation centers open 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, at a certain point, people are going to have to learn how to handle disputes without picking up a gun and shooting at one another. And it doesn't matter what community they come from. That's one of the things that we have to be honest about.
Delano, as always, great job. Later in the week, I think I'm going to bring you back and we're going to discuss solutions and how to improve gangster rap music. Because I'm looking at big tech and the government start to say, hey, there's certain forms of information we need to suppress, we need to censor. And like, oh, you want to go down that path? Well, how about all the misinformation and degradation and everything in this music? Maybe we should start taxing this type of pornographic music and make it less profitable. Maybe that will push people the right direction. But we'll save that conversation for later in the week. Good stuff as always.
Thank you.
Jimmy, Delano, I think he wants my job. I thought he wanted your job, but I think he actually wants my job.
He can't have my job. He has pride.
Is there something the matter with your job? Is that what he said?
I'm just saying.
That was some good stuff, though.
Hey, man, I love Delano. Seriously. Hey, real quick, let me ask you a question, though, because you're talking about gangster rap and the music. We're not saying nothing about our entertainment. We're not saying nothing about power. We're not saying nothing about empire. We're not saying nothing about the have and the have-nots. Meaning we're not saying nothing about Tyler Perry, Lee Daniels, and 50 Cent. These is black men that's doing this.
Geldings, I think they're called, according to Delano.
There you go.
I call them eunuchs.
There you go.
All right. Go to youtube.com/fearless with Jason Whitlock. Hit that subscribe and notifications button. We need you to join the Fearless Army. All right, when we come back.
They have no nuts.
when we come back, Greg Couch is going to join us from Chicago. He's written a very interesting piece about Cam Newton and the message of unity that Cam is pushing. All that and more. Welcome back to Fearless with Jason Whitlock. I am Jason Whitlock. All right, we're going to roll out to Chicago and bring in our man Greg Couch. But before we do that, I want to set it up. Greg wrote a very interesting column about NFL quarterback, New England Patriots quarterback, Cam Newton. Cam likes to be a YouTuber, an influencer, a broadcaster, whatever. He's got his own little YouTube page. And he put out something on Friday that he called You Gots to Be Cultured, I think it was called. And I think it was a message promoting unity, but here, let's take a look, listen to some highlights.
Yo, what's good? What's poppin'? And there's nothing more of a turnoff to me than a person who is uncultured. And there's nothing that I love more than black. But there's a fine line where it's just like, all right, I still got to understand who, Garth Brooks is, you know what I'm saying? I still got to understand who Kenny Chesney is, his music. You get around people and it's all like, little baby, little baby, little baby, little baby. And I with little baby, you dig? And his music. You know, if you're Italian, you know what I'm saying, try the orange chicken or the sake or whatever, like whatever floats your boat. And I'm sorry if I'm offending anybody. I really do not want to offend nobody. I just really want an open mind. You know what I'm saying? I want to see what the Harley Davidson folks look like. You know what I'm saying? Those of Sons Anarchy or something like that. You know what I'm saying? I really want to kind of see, like, it looks like unbelievable unity. And yeah. So that's what it is, man. I just would want everybody to kind of shuffle their deck and hear me out when I say, like, I am a black man in America and I take pride in that. I love that. I love black women. I love, you know what I'm saying, black people. But also it's time for black people to look outside or look over the fence. And it's time for other people to kind of look at our fence too and just be interested and empowered too and be like, oh, damn, like, that's pretty cool. I didn't know that.
All right, Greg, I enjoyed the video. It's 13 minutes. I think I understand what Cam was trying to say, but you tell me what you thought Cam was trying to say, because it seemed like you enjoyed it, appreciated it, and got his message.
Yeah, I thought he was making 2 points. I thought he was making a bigger point and a smaller picture point. And the bigger point was kind of what you said, a unity. You know, let's not cancel other cultures. Let's go out and experience different things. You know, I was telling my wife, I call it Cambaya, what he was saying. But, you know, I think his little picture was kind of, I think in the smaller picture, he's feeling pressure. You know, people have an idea of what a black quarterback's supposed to be. And, you know, we're so polarized now that you have to actually fit exactly 100% into the boxes that people are putting you into. And he doesn't want to be in that box anymore. And that's why he's wearing a tan suede stovepipe hat or whatever that was he was wearing. It was cool. And he's smoking a cigar. He's basically saying, here I am. I'm still me. I'm here, me right now, sending this message. And if you've got a problem with it, if I don't fit into your box, you know, that's too bad, because I think we should break out of these boxes. I think a lot of people feel trapped from COVID and from all the racial identities that we're pushing down everyone's throat now, especially his as a black quarterback. He doesn't want to feel that way. And so, you know, he's just saying, you know, let's go out and broaden ourselves. Let's think bigger and stop pressuring me to fit into this box. At the same time, you saw in the clip you just showed, you know, how many times he said in that video, I love black people. I'm a black person. I love black women. I love black food. That was a please don't hate me for saying this. He knows that's going to come off in a way that a lot of people aren't going to like. So, you know, give him some props for having the kind of guts to say that. But at the same time, he's begging people not to hate him for saying it.
I think, and I feel like I heard the same thing, but you being a dad and having a son who is creative and maybe more, what do they call, right brain than maybe other people, it connected with you on a deeper level perhaps than even me because of your relationship with your son?
Yeah, you know, also the 3 years I spent as a black quarterback for the Chicago Bears, you know, that was pretty. No, I mean, I understand.
Vince Evans, huh? You were Vince Evans.
Yeah, I got to meet him once anyway. But anyway, you know, I know, you know, kind of the idea here. I'm a middle-aged white guy saying I'm connecting with a guy who's saying, please don't put me in the box of a black quarterback. But you're right. My son, Michael, is a musician. And, you know, I was a jock growing up, a tennis player, baseball player, and some basketball. And I expected that's what he was going to be, too. And when he was even in his crib, I was taking his arm and I was trying to swing it in a tennis motion to try to get his arm used to a serve for when he got older. And then, you know, he just didn't care at all about sports, and it just didn't matter to him. And that's fine. I didn't stick him in that box. I didn't force him to be that way. But as he grew up, you know, he's a musician, and he went to high school, and he had long hair, and he was wearing the red John Lennon round wire glasses and wild clothes, and everyone else is wearing, you know, their favorite team shirt and shorts. And he stood out, and he stood out in a way where he wasn't treated very well. You know, a lot of the school, there'd be rumor that someone was selling drugs, and they'd just call him out of his class and tell him to come to the principal's office and talk about it. He's like, "What? Why me?" And they're searching his pockets, and there were a few times when the police pulled him over. Once specifically, I wrote about in the column where They just pulled him over, and he said, well, what's going on? And they said, your side mirror is over the center stripe of the street. So they said, so we're pulling you over because of that. And then they said, you seem nervous. And he's like, well, yeah, because you just pulled me over for no reason. And he goes, well, because you're nervous, we wonder if you have drugs in the car. So we need you to get out of the car and go stand behind the car with this other police officer and get on your hands and knees and put your head down while we search your car. I mean, this is just harassment. And he was coming to me at the time and saying, should I cut my hair? Should I change my clothes? And I said, no, you got to be yourself, but you're going to still keep getting pulled over. You're just going to have to put up with it. So yeah, it did resonate with me. I spent my whole life trying to get my son to be himself and to not be stuck in these boxes. And by the way, now here he is. He didn't even get the best grades in high school. He had chronic migraines from the way he was treated. And now he just graduated from Berklee College of Music, which is probably the best music school in the world. And he was treated great. I mean, his personality and his style and the way he dresses and everything were not considered a negative. It was considered part of him being him. And now he's getting his band together. He's got professors who want to collaborate with him. And he's also got a job at a school of rock in Boston where he's teaching music to little kids. And he loves those kids. And he knows where they're coming from. And he's going to treat them the way they should be treated, not the way he was. So yeah, this means a lot to me.
That's a fascinating story, and it's why I read it in your column, and I suggest people go read it, because I think it's a point of view and a perspective that a lot of people aren't familiar with, that anytime you are outside the norm in appearance, the way Cam is, the way your son is, there is a backlash to it, whether you're white or black. And I'm not trying to say, your son is Eric Garner or George Floyd or anything like that, but if you are different, this world pushes back against you, and that's fascinating. And I certainly, particularly listening to that explanation, I certainly get where Cam is coming from, but I also think that Cam is an NFL quarterback. And you also mentioned, and you took a little cheap shot at me in your column, talking about I love to ridicule Cam. And I am known for, the hats and the hair and all that, because he's an NFL quarterback. And so I think that sometimes because of the job he has and because of his unorthodox approach to communication and appearance, I think it undermines his message sometimes.
I mean, I know where you're coming from, and so yeah, I poked fun at you, and I was going to do it again now, but you already beat me to the punch. But it's sports, in sports, and in football in particular, I think that things are sort of simplified into the way you're thinking. You're told to think a certain way. You're tough, you're super masculine. You play for the team, you play hurt. They're just sort of basic. There's not a lot of room for nuance in there or subtlety, in my opinion, and so Cam is where he shows up at a press conference wearing a women's scarf from Paris, or he's wearing a foxtail hanging down his side of his leg. It's, I can see what you're saying. I mean, it may be a message that's tough for people who have been brought up a certain way and to think a certain way and behave a certain way to feel respect for that and to want to be led by that. And so, I would like to say, what Cam is saying is great, and then maybe this will break people out of their boxes too, and make people more empathetic toward other people and what their wishes are. But on the other hand, kind of what you just said. I mean, these people have all been brought up to think a certain way and feel a certain way, and now here's a guy showing up. I believe you said in an Aunt Jemima thing once.
I did not say Aunt Jemima.
I think the word is bonnet.
Mary Poppins. Remember I used to call the Mary Poppins hat or whatever. That's what I don't think I said Aunt Jemima. You're not going to hang me with that. All right. One of the funny things on this video, and I'm wondering if you thought Cam was serious, and I would suggest people go watch the complete 13 minutes. It is interesting. But at one point, Cam said that his mother's super religious, and that's all she knows is religion and church. And he indicated that he thought she would benefit, and I'm not joking, from visiting Magic City, one of the most famous strip clubs in Atlanta. Do you think he was serious when he said that, or was he joking?
You know, I don't know his family dynamic, but I will tell you that when I was in college, my mom once said, "Have you ever smoked pot before?" Back then it was illegal. And I said, "Well, yeah, I have twice. And, I just wanted to experience it." And she says, "Good. You should be trying different things and experiencing different things." And somewhere in that conversation, she mentioned cocaine. And I don't think she really wanted me to try cocaine, but I think she was just making a point. So I'm going to say that's what Cam meant, but I don't know. If he really wants his mom to go there, more power to him if he actually believes that would be valuable. But it was funny, if you watch that video, he says, because he went into imitating his mom's voice. And he said, if my mom went there, she'd just look around and go, "Oh, Cammy." It was kind of funny seeing him say that.
I actually have, I think, maybe I said, "Oh, Destiny" inside Magic City. I've got to keep it real.
Man.
I thought her name was Champagne.
Remember Lou Williams? That's where he went to go get chicken wings and got suspended from lemon pepper chicken wings.
Yeah,
he got suspended from the bubble. All right. On a more serious note, and I do, particularly this conversation, reading your column, Cam, like a lot of us over the past year, feel trapped. And I'll just say, for me, as a black person who doesn't follow the left-wing playbook, I get a lot of pushback for not doing that. And now we're in this environment where everybody, black athletes over social media, feel like they have to be unapologetically black at all times. And they wake up every day, how can I prove how black I am? And I think if you listen to Cam's video, he's frustrated by that and just kind of wants to do Cam things and just do what someone of great wealth and a curious mind would normally do. Do you think Cam is alone, or do you think other professional athletes are feeling the same pressure and are just as frustrated as Cam?
I think they're frustrated. It's a little hard for me, again, as a white guy, you're sort of asking me to get into the head of black athletes and how they feel about being black. And it's a little bit, disingenuous for me to sound like I'm overly educated on that. But, I think Cam, as a quarterback, as a black quarterback, he's getting a lot more attention and focus than everyone else. And so I think he probably feels it more so than other black athletes. But yeah, I'm sure the pressure's on every black athlete to be, it's just uncomfortable again. But, I just wonder whether Cam is worried that people are going to think he's not being black enough. And again, the attention is on him and the focus is on him as the quarterback. And so I think it's probably worse on him than anyone else. And, the black quarterbacks, there's Lamar Jackson and Russell Wilson. We're getting more and more of them, obviously, now. But it's a little hard to even know exactly what he's going through because there haven't been a ton of them.
Let me take you off the hook. I'm going to turn to Uncle Jimmy. Wake up, Uncle Jimmy. Do you think black athletes are feeling some frustration and boxed in by all this pressure to be unapologetically black at all times?
Of course. Just like Cam, that whole video he just did, it's very important that he shows how cool he is. Never mind the fact. Explain to me something, man. Okay, so we stopped smoking cigarettes, but suddenly we as athletes, it's okay to smoke big-ass cigars?
Everybody's smoking cigars.
It's not healthy.
Men, women, everybody.
And you really want to upset me, you got women smoking cigars.
I don't get it. But look.
You an athlete smoking a cigarette. They made fun of Lynn Dawson smoking a cigar at the Super Bowl.
Cigarette.
Smoking a cigarette and drinking a Falstaff at the Super Bowl. and look at this.
Well, hold on. I'll just be careful now. Our bosses at the Blaze, they're big cigar smokers.
Okay.
They're
also not NFL players. They're also not track runners.
Look, man, a victory cigar. Remember Red Auerbach? I don't remember, but Red Auerbach, when he was coaching the Celtics, he'd whip out a cigar to celebrate a victory. Cigars and sports have gone together damn near like peanut butter and jelly, Jim.
We saw Red Auerbach do it.
Yeah.
Since we saw Red Auerbach, another thing we saw a white person do and we wanted to turn around and do it.
That ain't it. It's called a victory cigar, Jim.
It's called unhealthy, Jason. Am I wrong? Craig, am I wrong?
He just called him Greg Craig.
Craig? Brother Couch, am I wrong?
You're right. It's unhealthy. I actually have personal reasons to be thinking that smoking is a horrible thing right now. So I'm with you on this one.
Tell me something. Does your son have hair like you?
He's worse.
Okay, then that's why he got pulled over. They thought he was black.
No, it was hanging. I think his son's hair hangs down his back. I think.
My son's hair does hang down his back, and you're talking about my hair and what you just said about thinking he's black. My daughter actually tells me that I'm trying to appropriate black culture with my hair like this, but this is just natural. This is just the way it goes. I have nothing to do with it.
All right, I'm gonna say something really inappropriate.
Here we go.
His wife doesn't think he's black.
You going to hell.
Greg.
Fearless, damn it.
Greg, will sports ever unify the way they once did? When I hear Cam talking, I hear a frustrated athlete that feels like, damn, everything that I've been taught in sports, society seems to be going the other direction.
You know, are you asking if they'll unify the way things were in the 1940s before? Sorry.
Here what are you? You the 1619 project now. No, I'm talking about when I was a kid and you were a kid and sports used to kind of bring us together. It certainly opened my mind to people from different backgrounds and exposed me to things it used to be fun to go do, let's go hang out with the white boys and see how they get down, listen to their terrible music. And
it always ended bad for me.
And then hang with let's go to the black party. Go, watch them, dance and anyway.
Run for our lives afterwards.
Anyway, Greg, do you have a closing comment before your wife texts me threatening murder?
I do think sports will eventually unify again. I mean, I'm a coach of a college tennis team, and I see how these kids get together and work together. And I think in the end, that'll all happen again. But maybe it's just going to get worse and worse for a little while because of all the sort of the way everyone's separating themselves now, polarizing.
Greg, forgive me for the joke, but I couldn't pass it up. I apologize. Great job. We'll talk to you next time. All right, youtube.com, hit that, /fearless with Jason Whitlock. Hit that subscribe and notifications button. When we come back, Uncle Jimmy's going to pray for me and share a Bible story.
I'm not wasting my breath.
We'll have an approval rating on Cam Newton. All right, welcome back to Fearless with Jason Whitlock. Time now for a Bible story from Uncle Jimmy and for me to repent the sins that I've committed in today's show. I used the D word. Mm-hmm. I cracked an inappropriate joke on Greg Couch. Mm-hmm. Uncle Jimmy, please bless us and bless me with some sort of Bible story that will help me repent my sins.
Well, first of all, the story that we're going to have today is about faith. And so what's going to be important for this...
Faith Evans?
Lord, gracious Heavenly Father, I ask that you help him. I don't want to slap the hell out of him right now in front of national TV, God, but help him.
Go ahead.
Today's story is about faith.
Gotcha.
Okay? And the Bible is full of faith, stories about faith. Okay? The Bible teaches us that if we didn't have faith, there wouldn't be no need for prayer. You know what I'm saying? Faith is the one constant ingredient needed for God's recipe of life. God said that faith is the evidence of an act not seen.
Faith is the evidence of an act not seen. We should have put that up on a quote board. Faith is the evidence of an act not seen. All right, continue, Uncle Jimmy.
Okay, and see, that brings me to my part of the story.
Yeah.
Because it talks about the lady who had been sick for 12 years. She had been sick for 12 years and bleeding and couldn't help her, but she had heard about this man named Jesus. She followed this man named Jesus on YouTube. Jesus had 4 million followers back then.
Hold for 1 second. You're telling me that Jesus had a YouTube page with 40 million followers?
And all of his miracles were all of his miracles was documented. Jesus was restoring sight to the blind. He was taking the lame and making them able to do the electric slide again. And then for an encore act, he would go out in the audience and find somebody that was dead and bring them up to the center stage, and he'd give them life. I mean, Jesus was becoming a rock star. You understand what I'm saying? And that's why he needed them. That's why he needed them disciples around him. He needed the disciples around him for security. See, because Jesus was starting to get like Forrest Gump, meaning everywhere he'd go, he'd walk, people would just start walking with him. They get to pushing and shoving. It's kind of like a rolling marsh pit. See that? But they was a marsh pit for Jesus. See, and that's what I like about this woman right here. Because the Bible says she fought through the trials. She fought through the crowd. The Bible said she threw some bows, and the Bible says she took some bows. The Bible says she also might have kicked over 2 or 3 blind, crippled, or crazy kids. But she did it. She did it all just to get close to Jesus. See, it was a woman that said to her, she said, I don't know why you coming up here. Said, you know Jesus ain't gonna touch you looking like that. This woman said, I don't need Jesus to touch me. She said, if I can just touch but the hem of his garment, she said, I'm gonna be all right. And just about that time, Jesus was walking past. And the lady reached out. And I told you she's losing blood. She got a little lightheaded. And she reached out to touch Jesus just as she fell. And soon as she touched Jesus, Jesus stopped in his tracks. He said, hey! He said, somebody touch me. And looked back, and the woman was on the ground like this. The woman looked up. She said, it was I, Lord. Jesus said, why you touch me? She said, because, Lord, I believe that if I could just touch the hem of your garment, she said, I believe I'll be well. Jesus looked at her and said, well? She said, yeah, I believe I'll be well. Jesus said, no, where? Where are you all right? You well, you healed. He said, get up, go on about your way. He said, but one thing I need you to do for me. Said, when I come back, you need to have me a peach cobbler. See that? See, that's the beauty of the story. The beauty of the story wasn't the woman. The beauty of the story was Jesus. In all of his glory, in all of his magnificence, Jesus knew that when he had faith, that when he came back through that town, he knew that the woman was going to have a peach cobbler ready for him. See, the Bible tells you, he who findeth a peach cobbler findeth a good thing. Praise God. Mama say, mama sa, mama kusta. That's what I'm talking about. Amen.
Amen. Did you just quote Janet Jackson?
Same thing. Come on. Amen all by myself.
You know, Hymn of the Garment's one of the great gospel songs of all time.
If I can just touch the hem of his garment.
Wow.
Right.
Anyway,
come on.
Let's move to our approval rate in the peach cobbler, huh? You sure what
the Bible say he that findeth the peach cobbler findeth a good thing.
Let me move to our approval rating for Cam Newton, who Greg Couch and I just discussed. Cam put out a nice little video promoting unity and for us to look out over our fences and for people to look out over their fence so we can just learn about each other.
Why was he dressed like the man in the Monopoly game?
I don't know, because Cam dresses crazy.
Come on, let's do this, man.
Anyway, Cam had a rough year last year.
Yes, he did.
The Patriots done drafted a young quarterback to get him up out of there, and Anyway, job performance, I'm going to go with a 10. He did have a lot of rushing touchdowns, so job performance, I'm going to give Cam a 10.
I'm going to give him a 5. Cam Newton made it hard for Bill Belichick to prove that Black Lives Matter. Especially when they're your quarterback.
Look, I'm going to go relatively high on character. Cam was raised in the church. He comes from a good home. Mom, I think his dad's a minister. His mom, as he said in the video, a godly woman. Cam has good character. He's the prodigal son that will come home. I do think, was his girlfriend a dancer or whatever? Anyway, I got him a 17 character.
If Cam ain't a character, I don't know what the hell is. He looked like the damn cat in the hat, if you ask me. He's a 25. Come on.
Authenticity. Is Cam authentic? I would have to say yes, but I'm going to stay in that middle of the road category. I'm going to give him a 16.
I think Cam is authentic. I think Cam loves the game of football. I think Cam wants to remain in the game of football. Cam got like 17 kids. Child support gonna kick Cam's ass if he fall out of football. Come on, man.
He ain't got 17 kids.
Good damn near.
You give him a 24 out of 25 on offense.
He's authentic about that.
All right, it factor, I'm going really high here. Cam has it factor. He dresses crazy. He's a fashionista. He's fearless with his fashion. You know, Cam's a good-looking dude. I got to admit that.
Hey, man, I'm going to be honest with you.
23, it factor.
I don't know what it is, but whatever the hell it is, Cam got it. I give him a 10.
That's low, Jim. 10. Anyway.
Beat the hell out of a 0.
I've got Cam overall at a 66 grease fire. He's getting.
I got him at 64. He candlelit.
Candlelit.
Cam looked like somebody that would put hot wax on his nipples on national TV while smoking a cigar.
I've done enough.
While wearing an Aunt Jemima hat.
I've got enough innocent enough trouble. We're done. That's it. That's all. We'll see you tomorrow.